This is our last session for our house party. Okay, Duncan and Mark, I think it's time for you to take us away.
Okay, so let's kick off with the session then. So you've got two of us. So my name is Duncan Mills. I'm an architect in the tools development team at Oracle. And I've been working with Oracle technologies for around 30 years, somewhat over 30 years now, actually. The slide's slightly out of date, which meant I started with version 4 of the database, believe it or not. And I've been using tools against the database for all of those 30 years, both as a customer and obviously with Oracle for the last 25 or so. And I'm joined by Mark, who will introduce himself, I'm sure. Go ahead, Mark.
Yep, thanks, Duncan. Yeah, my name is Mark Seefts. I'm the development manager for Oracle Apex. I've been with Oracle now for over 20 years. I joined Oracle in 1998 in Germany, moved to New York a year later, and I joined the Apex team in 2002, and I've been doing Apex ever since.
There you are. So what we're going to talk about today is really look at this issue, or just scrape the surface of this UI development issue. I mean, when you look at the UI development space at Oracle, we've got a whole bunch of tools that speak to different development styles, different languages, different development processes, and there's obviously no way we could even think about covering those in any depth. So what we decided to do really is just to look at either end of the spectrum. The stuff that I primarily look after, which is Oracle Jet, which is a very low-level core toolkit, and then the other extreme where you've got a very productive low-code, kind of very developer-focused environment in Oracle Application Express. But in between that, we have got all sorts of other products as well, and there are all sorts of ways you can build applications against a database, of course, that don't involve any particular Oracle tooling. You know, the choice is yours, as is always the case. So we'll start off down here in the corner with Oracle Jet. I'll touch briefly on Visual Builder Studio, which is, if you like, a cousin of Jet in the sense that it provides a more low-code development environment on top of the development style that Jet engenders. And then we're going to hand over to Mark to talk and work through a use case in Application Express relating to the scenario we've been talking about today with GrubDash. So let's start off then with what is Jet. You may or may not be familiar with it. You'll certainly be familiar with it in many ways, in that you will have seen it, I'm sure, in many Oracle products, but you probably wouldn't have realized, yeah, this is a thing that I could perhaps use. It's a low-level toolkit we developed specifically for user interfaces that ultimately render in the browser. So it works around standard HTML and JavaScript and CSS, but is basically a set of specialized components that do the things that a company like, an enterprise company like Oracle care about, right? It's going to be a set of components that do things like handle internationalization, are accessible for users with varying abilities. All of those kind of things that, you know, out there in the marketplace, there's a lot of JavaScript toolkits that come in a fashion, you know, they live for a year or two and they disappear. And, you know, finding one that's going to be around for a long time and has all of those tick boxes is very important. And we just couldn't find what we needed. So, of course, we built one. This is an open source project. So everything we do here both incorporates various popular third-party frameworks already, and then kind of layers our secret source on top, but in open source. It's all under universal permissive license. So you can go away, look at the Jet source code, and do what you want with it. It's very much focused at building enterprise applications either on web or mobile. So that's kind of the mission statement. Very exciting, I'm sure. But, you know, what's actually in there? Well, there are these special components I talked about, and there's around 100 or so Jet components. So that's everything from, you know, input fields through to an extremely rich set of visualization components, which you'll see from me and you'll also see from Mark, in fact. And surrounding that, we've got various existing popular frameworks that are used to kind of glue everything together. So Cordova, for example, is used when we are building a mobile application to handle the integration with the on-device features. And so if you're coming to development against Oracle from a JavaScript background, you'll be familiar with most of these tools already. And we've recently made the move into TypeScript as well. That's becoming, you know, it's funny, in the last discussion we were talking so much about, you know, how things come around and how nothing's ever really new. And it's funny to see in the JavaScript world, JavaScript, you know, a famously bad development language in many ways, because it's so untyped and so dangerous and easy to make mistakes. And so, of course, people start layering on something that makes it look a lot more like a structured or more strongly typed language like Java, and that's what TypeScript is. So we've started to support TypeScript much more seriously as well, so you can use either. So you've got a bunch of existing frameworks that are well known and popular throughout the industry. You've got some specific web components that Oracle supply, and then you also have various framework bits to help you work successfully against Oracle services and products, of course, the database included. Now, this is purely client-side. There's nothing in here that says you have to be running against a database or any kind of server, right? This is just running purely in the browser. So there's still a lot to do in a UI that you build using this technology to somehow get data. But of course, that's where things like ORDS come in. There's an easy way to get data from the databases, or the microservices we've been talking about are an excellent source of data for this kind of UI. We have very much a big separation of concern between building a UI and getting the data for that UI. The key characteristics, as I said, it's all about the enterprise. It's about accessibility, security, internationalization. All of those kind of things are key because we build our software on top of this stuff. And if we don't build accessible software, we can't sell it, right? And of course, that makes it available to our customers as a feature as well, which is great. We have a fairly rich component set. As I said, there's about 100 components in there. But I think one of the most important and exciting features of Jet as a low-level framework is its extensibility. And I'm excited about this because it's the area I specifically work on, of course. But the ability, it's always been hard in the traditional frameworks that we've created. You know, there have been proprietary ways of creating custom components, which mean that those custom components are, you know, very niche. They tend to be created by a handful of partners, perhaps, and really it doesn't kind of enter into the psyche of the everyday customer or everyday user of that framework. Components within Jet are based on the W3C web component standard, which is still a slightly evolving standard, but it's getting there. This basically allows you to build components which are custom HTML tags. That's all they are. But it's not depending on the server side to do any kind of interpretation for you. Everything's done in the browser. And we can really simply, we provide tooling and all sorts to help you create these components. And they are, as I said, totally standard. And I did a quick check this morning, actually, on we have an internal catalog where internal teams publish custom components that they've been creating. It was really interesting to see. I just didn't believe the numbers, actually. As I said, we've got 100 native components in Jet, but in this shared catalog, we've got somewhat over 650 extra components. So these are extra components that teams have built using some of those existing components, or maybe pulling in other technologies altogether, or maybe just making a slight tweak. You know, those components may be as simple as a specialized version of an input field with a particular set of validations on it, or they may be as complex as a whole sub-application, you know, multi-page flows. So what we mean by components is quite a flexible thing, but it's a really exciting area, and you know, one that I think you'll see explode in the future. Some of the other things I wanted to pull out here that I think are key are, first of all, the responsive UI aspect. A really big challenge today when you're building UIs is actually, what form factor do I go for? You know, do I concentrate on the mobile phone as the primary delivery mechanism, or maybe tablets? But when a mobile phone and a tablet kind of are almost the same screen resolution, then it becomes a very difficult choice. So what we've really been focused on over the last 4 years is building layouts and components within Jet that will allow you to build fully responsive UIs. So in fact, you can code into the UI and use these components to automatically adjust the application to the user user interface device you're actually displaying on. So that really cuts down the development costs vastly. It's one of these things that if you ask developers to do it themselves, kind of by hand, it's generally a disaster, right? They don't have access to all the devices, they don't try all the screen resolutions, they don't see what happens when they zoom the page, all of those kind of things. But we kind of built that in for free at the framework level, and that's a real bonus for building out these applications. The other things are kind of what you would expect in terms of, there are underlying infrastructure bits like the routing and the common model for accessing things like ORDS as simply as possible. And it is a very productive framework, even though it's low level. There's no denying that. You're working at a JavaScript coding level most of the time. It's still very productive for all of that because of the value that the complex components bring to the whole story. And a final call out on the tooling side, although it's just a runtime framework, you can use any editing environment you want, any editor you like. We do provide some tooling just to kind of make things a bit easier. If you're using Microsoft Visual Code, which is a very popular editing tool these days, we have a plugin specifically for that, which I'll kind of show you in action in a moment. We have a command line tool which will help you scaffold up new applications or create new components, kind of taking all of the boring bits out of setting up a project and having you with something ready to run out the box. And then another very exciting part for me, because I'm that kind of geek, we have an extensible audit framework. And I think this is something that a lot of developers kind of don't worry about. It's like testing. They'd rather not think about doing deep inspections on their code. The team leader will do that, or we'll worry about that on code review. The auditing framework in Jet is extensible, so you can write your own audits, which is really good, but also it's already very rich in terms of the number of audits it has. And that allows you to really catch problems before you even check the code in. And I'll show you that quickly in operation in the demo in a second. So there's a lot there. Let's kind of move on then, I guess, to seeing what it might look like. So I was tasked in the context of this GrubDash application. Well, Duncan, the kind of thing you might want to build a UI of is the actual user interface for a user. So the kind of ordering application. So I gave myself a day to do it. I didn't give myself long. As I said, for low-level coding, this is still pretty productive stuff. So I wrote a little application, and we'll look at the code of this in a second. Let's hopefully we get the right one. We can pop this up over the top of, here we are, right. So hopefully you can see this. This is the GrubDash app. Now, as you can guess, I'm not a user interface designer. User experience design is not my thing. What I've done here is kind of use out-of-the-box colors and themes and just put together the application from the functional perspective. And obviously you can have someone who knows what they're doing come in and give you all the right colors and make it look truly beautiful. But most of this application was just generated by one of the standard templates. So we have a standard mobile template, which will generate up a skeleton mobile app for you, which is suitably responsive in the sense that things stay where they should stay, and as you move things around, everything will resize correctly. You notice here I've got some nice icons. These are actually universal theme icons. So, there's a bit of a crossover there with the application Express world, which is nice. So, this is the ordering application. So we'll decide first of all kind of type of food I like. Well, junk food maybe, but we'll go with fusion because we had kind of a sushi theme going on this evening. So let's go for that. And I don't know if you can see that there on Zoom. It may or may not have made it across. But one of the things when we're operating at this low level, of course, is we have full control over things like animation. The screens themselves can be highly interactive. So for example, as I start choosing things from the menus, you'll see various parts of the screen are just updating. And so I've got all that kind of control, should I need it, in the application. And likewise, just on the responsive side, if I make this wide enough, then we go to 2-column and so on. We've got a lot of control, which is one of the, for certain styles of application, like a consumer-facing application, that's pretty key. We're ready to order. I'll choose my address. Well, maybe I want to add a new address, or they can stick with my on-file address. We'll go to deliver now. So let's just think about the data flow so far. That first screen, the data was going to be coming from ORDS, so coming directly from a relational database where we had all of the tables with the basic sets of suppliers and the menus in JSON format. The menu screen was coming out of that JSON document. And when I do deliver, we're actually going to be placing the order with the backend microservice. And what's going to happen here actually is a couple of things. First of all, we made the REST call to post up that data, got the response back. And then as part of that response, we got information about the delivery provider. So Sushi Heaven in this case is going to be providing the delivery. And what I was then able to do was to use our Oracle spatial integration through a mapping component and map out kind of the routing. It's a slightly contrived example, but a nice example of using the spatial technology we were talking about just now inside of one of these JET applications. So let's go away and have a quick look at how that looks. Apologies if there's a loud bird in the background. I am in a garden office and the birds are quite songful at this time of evening. So I'll bring up my development tool. If I can persuade. There we go. So obviously I don't want to spend too long looking at code like this, because if you're not into JavaScript and HTML coding, it's not going to mean a thing anyway. But you'll be familiar enough, hopefully, with HTML to understand, yeah, this looks like a pretty standard HTML document. I'm here inside of the Visual Code product, which is a Microsoft editor. But we've got the JET plugin, so the little indicator here is actually showing me parts of this UI that are using JET features. So everything here just looks like standard HTML, which is exactly what it is. We've got some standard JET components. And if we jump over to the map page, that whole mapping area was supplied by this OJE spatial map component. And that's a custom component. That's not in the base JET component set. But we were able to quickly build a component that wrapped up spatial technology and then makes it available to any developer to embed a map into their project, which is a huge force multiplier, right? I mean, this is why I'm so passionate about components, is that they are a great way of taking something very complicated and encapsulating it in a really simple to use way. You know, it's just got a few properties that the developer has to populate, and away they go. They don't have to worry about how it actually works under the covers. Whether that's a good or bad thing, of course, is up to you. And then, you know, in terms of the coding, well, it's all JavaScript. So, for example, here's where we're actually doing the routing call. We're making a call to the location service with the from and to address, and it's returning the information about the routing in terms of a GeoJSON document, which has then been applied onto a layer inside of that map. So we're kind of using that information directly from the spatial option, which is, again, kind of hidden away from me. I don't have to understand GeoJSON to use this, but it's very simple to just layer into my application. One thing that I do want to show you before I move off this screen, actually, is if I just stop the server. So one of the bits of our tooling is you've got an inbuilt web server just to be building stuff on. I'm just going to run an audit, actually, and just see what I've done in my code. So this is the audit framework is set up kind of automatically. And in this case, in that few seconds, or literally a second or so, it ran almost 4,500 audit rules on my code and detected a couple of issues. In this case, a couple of deprecated features that I need to upgrade to pick up the latest version. So that's the real power of audit, right? This is not being caught much later on in the development process. It's been caught before I even do a check-in. The final thing I wanted to kind of touch on is to look at this from a slightly higher perspective. So this is obviously very low code, low level. If we look at it from the low codes perspective, I can go into Oracle Visual Builder, which is a web-based IDE that runs on top of this JET technology. And so here I can go and visually pick up that exact same component. So these are all the different JET components. We'll look at these in a second. I can pick up the map. I can drop that into my visual development environment. and then I can very simply configure it. So for example, I'm going to configure it to point to my home. We'll set a zoom level of 12. So that's going to take me down to where I live, which is Winchester in the UK. And I can even add on another layer of metadata here to give me a layer on the mapping. So we'll add in a layer of information I've already built, which gives me a pin. And that pin just so happens to be my local pub, which unfortunately isn't open today, but when lockdown lifts in the UK, I'll be straight over there, I can guarantee it. So where can you go to learn more about this stuff? Obviously, we've only been able to very quickly scrape the surface of what JET's all about. Well, the place to go is the JET homepage, which is oraclejet.org on the internet. And this will give you everything you need to know about how to use the components, how to get started, how to install them. It's all done from the command line, or you can use Visual Builder, of course, if you want to get into it from a kind of drag and drop perspective. And this comes complete with a cookbook, and this is a key part of the framework. So every built-in component we have, you can go in, you can explore it and play with it, right? So you can actually start to look at the component like the diagram component here, which is implementing, in this case, the Sankey diagram. I can go down and I can look at the code that was used to create that thing and copy and paste it. You know, the comment was made earlier, everything's copy and paste nowadays. That's never truer than when it comes to user interfaces, where most user interfaces are built solely with the help of Stack Overflow. But we like to help you in exactly the same way here with the cookbook, which gives you all of these different versions of different demos or components you can play with and actually change. So I can go in here, I can change the HTML, apply that, and see what happens. So I don't even have to build my application to try out a component. I can try that out live. Okay, so by all means, go away and have a look at that. Let's go back to the presentation so I don't take up too much of Mark's time. To learn more about JET, go to oraclejet.org. We're obviously on Twitter at OracleJet. We've got a YouTube channel as well. And there's also a Slack channel. So we've got the Slack channel associated with the event today, but there's also the OracleJet community Slack channel that you can join as well. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Mark, and he can fill you in with some kind of much more in-your-face coding using Application Express.
All right, so I already introduced myself. So let's start with low-code development and Oracle Apex. First off, Oracle Apex, not everybody might be familiar with it, so let me briefly explain what that is. Apex is what we call a low-code development platform, and it's targeted at business, citizen developers, as well as professional database developers. And you use Apex to develop modern web applications and mobile apps. That means any kind of web application that can run on your mobile web browsers and your desktop web browsers. Applications developed with Apex are responsive and accessible. And customers generally use Apex to build applications on their Oracle databases to visualize and analyze their data in the Oracle database and to maintain the data. Apex is also open to remote data sources, so you can easily access remote Oracle databases through REST-enabled SQL, and you can also interface with and build applications on any kind of REST APIs. Apex is a platform or development tool that is built into the Oracle database, and on the server side in the database, you leverage your SQL and PL SQL skills if you want to extend Apex, if you want to build queries for reports and charts and such. And on the client side, you use JavaScript and in particular Oracle Jet to do your customizations. We actually integrate with Oracle Jet. We use a lot of Oracle Jet components, for example, for data visualization. All our charts are based on Oracle Jet, and I'm going to do a brief demo of that in a moment. Now we call Apex a low-code tool because the way you develop is typically through wizards. You describe what your application is doing. You go through applications through point and click. You may be selecting data sources or typing in SQL queries. but for the most part, you can develop fully functional applications just by describing your app. And there are many benefits to this type of coding. It's generally very easy to get started. You don't really need to know a lot of coding. You may need to know a little bit of SQL to access data, but other than that, much of the complexity and consideration. Well, I think I froze here for a second. Hopefully you can hear me again. So a lot of the complexity of building applications is taken care of for you by the framework. And we have a lot of rich functionality, rich components built in. Some again are based on OracleJet. Others like interactive reports, faceted search and such are built by us, built into the framework, and I'm going to show them in a moment. And by not having to write a lot of code, you're going to be very productive. We believe most applications are 10 to 20 times faster built than you would otherwise if you have to hand code everything. And that enables you to really concentrate on what you want to build, your business requirements, and not so much on worrying about the infrastructure, worrying about how to deploy your applications, worrying about how to make your apps accessible or make them responsive. All of this is taken care of for you by the framework. So with all of that, you typically get to release and deploy your apps a lot faster and with a lot of less cost, right? You don't have to spend a lot of time coding, and really every line of code that you're writing has a cost associated with it. It's not just the writing of the code, it's also maintaining the code, debugging the code. So having to write very little code makes you a lot more productive. It makes your app dev a lot cheaper. Now, a few characteristics about Apex. Apex is a browser-based IDE, browser-based development. So your app dev, as well as running your application, runs entirely through a web browser. You can build in your own JavaScript. You can build in your own pure SQL. And for that kind of code, you can use any kind of editor that you like. But typically, you don't have to. We have an IDE built into Apex that allows you to browse and interface with your database, compile pure SQL code. And we also have interfaces built in that allow you to inject and write JavaScript for client-side customizations. One important characteristic is that your application definitions are stored as metadata in the database. So Apex is not a code generator. You're not ending up with lines and lines and lines of JavaScript code or pure SQL code or other kind of code that you may end up having to modify if you want to do customizations. It's all in metadata in the database, and it remains there. When you run your applications are run out of that metadata and generated on the fly as you use your apps. And that enables you to always go back to your model and make modifications. Put in your own pure SQL code, put in your own JavaScript customizations. You never actually leave this model. You never actually have to dig into generated code. Apex runs everywhere where the Oracle database runs. So historically, we started with Apex in 2002, 2003. Apex was a tool built into the Oracle database, and it still is, but it was typically run on premises. We did run it sort of as a cloud service from the very early years, 2004. Around that time, we launched apexoracle.com, which is still our hosted service, still running as an evaluation service for Apex, has been running for the last 15, 16 years. But typically customers would run Apex on premises. But more recently, we made Apex available on a number of Oracle Cloud services. So you can now run Apex on Database as Service, DBaaS, as well as on the Autonomous Cloud service, which includes Apex. And there's a free tier included. So if you want to try out or actually build apps on the Autonomous database, you can sign up for the free tier of the Autonomous database and start developing your Apex apps. And Apex also runs on third-party cloud services, so you're not really limited or locked in. If you choose to run Apex on other hosting providers that run Oracle databases, that's certainly an option too. Now, I touched on the kind of data sources you can access with Apex. Historically, typically, it was primarily local tables in your Oracle database. More recently, we opened up the platform to allow you to access remote databases, as well as interface with a number of different REST APIs. We have support natively built in for things like ORTs and other Oracle REST APIs, but you can also interface with any kind of REST API out there. And I guess most importantly, Apex is a feature of the Oracle database, so there isn't any extra cost if you run the Oracle database on premise or on the cloud. Apex is part of that service. There are no extra costs to build apps or to run your apps, and there are no limitations on the number of users you can allow access to your app. All right, then some of the use cases. We always start out with talking about spreadsheet replacements, and I'll do a demo of that as well. But that, I guess, leads to the impression that Apex is only good for small-scale spreadsheet replacement style apps, and that is certainly not true. Apex is a full web application development framework. In Oracle, we actually use Apex to run the Oracle Online Store. Shop.oracle.com is an Apex app. We also use Apex as a development service inside Oracle. We have an internal Apex service, a single Apex instance that is used by over 5,000 groups inside Oracle to develop any kind of ad hoc in-house application that we might need. So certainly able to build large-scale apps, certainly be able to scale. But the sweet spot, or an area where Apex is really popular at, are these opportunistic apps, filling the gap in your app dev needs, stuff that you never get to, things that your lines of businesses use Excel for, or other desktop databases. That's something where Apex really excels, where you can go in and have any of your business users or database developers or other developers quickly build applications. All right, let's do a demo. So I'm starting out with a spreadsheet, like I indicated. And the spreadsheet that I have here is basically the end result of what we talked about all day today. This GrabDash application where you have like an online store where you sell sushi and other Asian fusion dishes, and you deliver them to different zip codes. And this is the order items table, essentially, that has a list of all the items.
Hey, Mark,
yep.
We don't see if you're showing us something different than the slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me share.
That's okay.
I thought I had my desktop shared. What's that? Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks for letting me know. So this is the spreadsheet I was talking about. It shows items and orders and item price, number of items, delivery zip codes, and then delivery times, the order times, and the promised and actual pickup times. So I want to build an application on this data to do some basic data analysis. And the first step for me is to load this data into my database. So let me switch to Apex now. You should hopefully see my browser here in a moment. So this is Apex, and I'm running Apex on apexoracle.com. This is our free evaluation service. You can go there today, sign up for Workspace, and do the exact same thing that I'm showing you here. I'm starting pretty much from nothing. I have no pre-created code. The only thing I have is a table in my database. And when you go to the SQL workshop, you can actually look into the database that is running on. So I'm going to the object browser. I'm seeing all the tables in my database, one of which is this order items table. It has the same kind of columns that I had in my spreadsheet. And then when I click on data, there's nothing in. So now I want to load data into this table. And then I want to build an application on this data. And then I want to deploy that application and basically share it with all of you to try out. Now I'm going back to my IDE, to my application builder. I'm going to start out with our create application wizard. I'm going to start out from a file. I have many different options how I could go about building applications. I could start building an application from scratch. I could install one of our built-in demo apps and productivity apps. I could build applications on existing tables, on REST APIs. But in my case, I want to load the data from that spreadsheet into this existing table. Oh, there you go. So now I'm going to pick the order items table. And now it's actually mapping all these 11 columns to my existing columns. And it's giving me a preview of the data that I'm about to load. That looks good to me. I'm going to proceed, load data. And now these 50 rows are going to be loaded. And now I could go and look at my table, see that the data is there, but I believe it is. So I'm going to directly jump into the Create Application Wizard. And in the Create Application Wizard, Apex makes a number of assumptions for me. Kind of goes back to our session earlier about machines writing code for you, right? So just by looking at the data, Apex suggests a number of components like a dashboard, a search page, an interactive report in a form, and a calendar for me. It looked at the data, it found there are dates, there are order items, there's numeric values, there are certain spread of numbers. So based on all that information, it kind of wrote this for me. And I guess looks good to me for now at least, so I'm going to go with that. You can make some modifications like pick a different theme, pick a different icon, pick a different navigation style. But I'm going to go mostly with the defaults here. And then I'm just going to go right ahead and create this application. Now what happens here, going back to my earlier slides, Apex is generating metadata in the Oracle database in the Apex schema that defines these pages, along with a number of what we call supporting objects, things like, shared components, sorry, things like list of values, authentication schemes, and such. All right, so I have my application built. And I now just want to go ahead and run this app. So I'm going to click here on Run. I'm going to type in my authentication, and by default, that's Apex authentication, but you can easily switch this to single sign-on, to OAuth 2, use your Facebook or Google or Twitter account, and authenticate that way. And then I'm going to hop into my application, and that's what it looks like. That's a typical Apex look and feel. You have this navigation here on the left-hand side. You have a main menu, and when I click here on Order Item Search, I'm being taken to this initial faceted search report. And what that is, it's kind of like the pattern or the UI interface that you are probably familiar with by going to Amazon or other e-commerce style applications. You have these facets here on the left-hand side. You have a search field, and Apex helps you with these facets to narrow down your search results. So as I make selections here on the left-hand side, for example, I really like, say, Odin, then my result set gets reduced to those 8 hits. But my other facets also get their counts updated. So what's happening here is that my client side, my client JavaScript, actually talks through my database through Ajax. And on the database, Apex is using analytics to do the counts, to do the computations, and to kind of come back with these results. So now that I have 8 rows, I can further narrow it down. Let's say I'm interested in zip code 94107. I click here, and now I have my 2 orders in zip code 94107. Now there are a few things that my wizard didn't get quite right, because I have times here, and what I'm seeing are dates. So I do want to make a few modifications. And for that, I'm going to switch into our page designer. And that's our main IDE. Looks a little bit similar to the Visual Builder UI that Duncan had just shown us. So I'm going into this report, and I'm going to edit these 4 columns that deal with delivery times. I'm going to display them all. And I'm just going to change the format mask to something like HHMI PM, showing me just the time in the US time format. I'm going to save this, run this again, and now I actually see the different times. So it makes a lot more sense. Now I can actually, I guess, draw some conclusions about how long it takes to deliver things. But overall, this component here that got generated for me is what we call facet search, and it's ideal reporting component for large data set where you want to kind of narrow down your results and find data. If you actually want to do analysis and want to edit and work with your data, there's another component that we call interactive reports that allows you to do just that. So it looks similar to my faceted report, faceted search, but it doesn't show the search here on the left-hand side. But instead, it gives me some, I guess, Excel-like data analysis features. So again, I'm going to go back to Page Designer. And just like before, I want to update these 4 columns to a certain format mask, HHMI24. Then I also want to see the order ID. And that's shown. Okay, cool. Okay, that didn't work. So I made a mistake. Let's see what I messed up. That's better. All right, so there are my times. Now I can include additional columns like my order ID. And now I can do some analysis, right? For example, what if I wanted to see what my actual delivery time is? Sorry. So for that, I'm going to create what we call a compute column. I'm going to call this delivery time. And I kind of created my little formula here ahead of time. So I want to get the actual delivery time, subtract from that the order received time, and then convert that into minutes and truncate it. So it looks like this. Apply changes. And now I can see how many minutes it actually takes to deliver my order. All right, that's nice, but it would be, I guess, even nicer if I could visualize that somehow. So I can actually go in and create a chart around it. And let's do a pie chart, and I want to see the average delivery time by zip code. So I'm going to pick the zip as my label. I pick the delivery time as my value, and then I'm going to look at the average. And there you go. Looks like the quickest delivery is about here, 94120, 94107, and the longest delivery time is over here, 941121. Right, so that's nice, but maybe I want to get even more information. So I could actually create a pivot report and drill this further down into zip codes and products or items. Right, so I'm going to pivot on the zip code and my item name, and I'm going to do again the average of my delivery time. And now I can see by zip code how long it takes to deliver certain items. And most of these times are pretty consistent. There's a little bit of a gap between like curry rice and natto and udon for some reason. All right, so this is basic analysis with interactive reports based on the data that I've just uploaded. But Apex, of course, also made a few assumptions about the kind of data that I want to analyze. So it created this dashboard here for me automatically. Yeah, that's coming up. So let's try this again. All right. So interruption. So there's my dashboard, and Apex automatically created these Oracle Jet-based charts for me based on the data. So there are different item names, there are different item prices. There's an item count down here and a delivery zip. So a lot of data charts that I can use to analyze my data. And of course, I can go in and change the data. For example, I could go in and make this item price series a line chart if I wanted to. So let's change this to line. And then I get a line chart here. Now this kind of goes off screen. And the reason for that is because this automatically changed my height. So let's adjust that. And there you go. That looks better. So now I have a line chart here, and I can go ahead and make modifications to all these other chart types. Let's do one more. Let's change the delivery zip to a pyramid style chart. There you go. And there's my pyramid. Now I kind of touched on how you can actually inject a little bit of code into your declarative environment. I want to do just that in a moment, injecting a little bit of JavaScript. So on this item name bar chart, I want to add a button. And that button I would like to use to display my data horizontally, to flip the direction of my chart. So I'm going to add a dynamic action in here. The dynamic action is basically the declarative JavaScript, although in this case, I'm actually using some real JavaScript code, and I'm going to copy and paste some Oracle Jet JavaScript from the cookbook. There you go. I'm going to do the same thing again, this time with a button to turn my chart into a vertical chart. Again, I'm adding a dynamic action that, oops, not that, that gets executed when I push this button. And in this case, I do want to also run some JavaScript. And again, I'm going to copy some JavaScript code that turns the orientation of my jet chart. There you go. And because my region is called my chart, I do need to change my static ID here. And that should be it, hopefully. Running my app. Wait, I do need to put the buttons into a actually visible position. All right. So they're my buttons, and now I can click them to change the orientation of my chart. So just by adding this little bit of code and those button actions, I was able to call Oracle Jet and call the Oracle Jet API to change my chart orientation. All right, so that's all nice, and it's all kind of generated for me by the Create App Wizard, right? I haven't really done much myself. I kind of tweak things here and there a little bit, but I haven't really done much actual coding, if you will, or defining new pages and components myself. So let's actually see how that works. So what I want to do is go back to my application builder homepage here and use what we call the Create Page Wizard to just add a blank page to my chart. And I'm going to call this deviation. And it's going to get a breadcrumb. And that should be all I need here. Next, I want to hook it up into my navigation menu. And then finally, I finish this. And now when I run my app again, I should have a new blank page. There you go. Nothing there. So let's add something to this page. And what I'm going to add is another chart. So I'm going to add the chart region. I'm going to call this deviation. I'm going to make this a chart. And unlike my previous example, I'm actually going to put the code right into this data source over here. And it's going to be based on a SQL query that I'm typing in. There you go. And then I'm going to make this a polar chart. And then I'm going to define two chart series. The first one, and it's going to be a line chart. And it's going to be based on my region source. And it's going to be showing me my delivery zip and my actual time, arrival time. And in addition to that, I'm going to create a second series, and that's going to be my promise time. And that's also going to be a bar chart based on my region source. In this case, it's delivery time versus promise time. And then change this here to actual. And now I should get a nice chart that shows me the difference between the promise time and the actual delivery time. There you go. And that looks a little bit funky, and the reason for that is that because I did not make that a line chart. There you go. All right, so that's it, and there's my chart. All right, so now I have a fully functional application. I can do analysis, I can search data, I can report data, I can actually edit my data if I wanted to, but I have a nice backend analysis application for my order items data. Final step before I deploy this, I'm going to change my UI. I don't really like this red look. So I'm going to go to a dark theme. And then I'm going to change this to like a bit of an orange look here. That looks nice. All right, so I'm going to save this as demo. Then I'm going to set this as current. And there's my app. Right, I do want to see if this is really responsive and runs on my phone as well. So I'm going to go into my phone simulator here, and there's my app running on a phone. And I can go to my home page. You can see how it responsively kind of rearranged my menu buttons. I can now get back to my dashboard, look at all these charts, and I can go into my deviation chart here. So there you go. That all works really nice. So I think I'm good to actually share this with you guys. And this is running on apexoracle.com, and it's running in my workspace. And I actually created an account for all of you to use. And I'm going to post that account information here in my application title, so you don't have to remember it. So the username is demo, and the password is demo123. And let's try that to make sure that actually is true. Demo123. Demo. Okay, sorry. It's demo123 exclamation point. All right, so with this account information, you can now go either to this URL, or you can just lift up your phone and scan this barcode. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to hold my phone here. I'm going to open it automatically up in my browser, and you'll have the application on your phone, and you can just play with this app that I've just created. So go ahead, play with this, try it out, see how you like it. And then if you would like to try this out yourself, there are a number of options for you. You can do what I just did on apexoracle.com, create a free workspace there and build the same kind of app that I just did. Or you can go to our Oracle Cloud and sign up for the autonomous database. There's a free tier, and you can do all of these things on our free tier on the Oracle Cloud. Or if you want to download it and install it on premises, you can go to apexoracle.com/download and install it on your own Oracle database. There's a database called Oracle XE, Oracle Express Edition, which is actually free, which you can also download from OTN. So you can download the whole stack, Oracle XE, Ports, Oracle Data Services, and Apex, and run it all on your local machines. All right, that's all I have.
Thank you, Duncan and Mark. What a way to wrap up this edition of our database house party. This has been just absolutely fantastic, and thank you for all your time. So with that, I want to thank all our attendees for joining us today. This has been a great 6 hours. We're so happy to spend our time and your time with you, and we hope you found this helpful. Please do fill out the feedback. We'd love to hear from you about what you thought about these sessions, and if you'd like to hear other topics at this kind of venue, we would love to come and present those for you as well. With that, I think we'll wrap up this house party, and until next time, we'll see you then. Thank you. Bye now.